actually going to start chapter 18 today. So, Tanya actually is, in the first part of Tanya, the part that we're learning now, called the book of the Benoni, is 53 chapters. But actually in the 53 chapters itself, it's like divided into different sections. And Perek Yud Ches, chapter 18, really starts another section. It's a continuation of before, but it starts a whole other section. And let me give you a bit of background. So, and really this goes till the end of chapter 25. It's quite some of it's a bit complicated actually. It's a difficult chapter, but we'll get there. We'll go through it slowly. So, Tanya was based on the pasuk, as we said a number of times. In the very beginning, he brings the pasuk, the verse that Ki korev elecha hadover ma'od, that Hashem said that the Torah is accessible and easy, so to speak, close to everyone. B'ficha u'bilvavcha la'asoisoi, whether it's by mouth, speech, in other words, or heart, or to do, right? So speech, action, and thought, but the way it says thought is that thought is laid, means emotion, feeling, right? And up until now, what he explained was that the difficult, it needs to be explained in general how Torah mitzvahs is kind of easy to keep, the word easy is probably not the wrong word, but accessible or reachable for everyone, and that's why he says everyone can essentially at least aspire to be a Benoni, which is to be in control of our thought, speech, and action, essentially, right? But in the last few chapters, he also said that the most difficult part to interpret in that pasuk is bilvavcha, your heart. Because he said that really to achieve this properly, it needs love of Hashem and fear of Hashem, right? As the Zohar says, that the Torah mitzvah is like the bird, love and fear is like the wings, so therefore being in constant connection with Hashem and overcoming the nefesh abamis and the Yetzer Hara and so on, that's difficult on a consistent basis, and therefore it needs that concept of Avas Hashem. In the beginning, he explained that what that needs really is full-blown emotional love of Hashem. Then he went on to explain, as we did in the last couple of chapters, that actually it's not really accessible to everyone, right? Not everyone, and we know that, it's a very, very difficult madrega to come to develop a full-blown love of Hashem. So we went on to another alternative strategy, and that is at least to reveal what he called the love of Hashem in the brain, which means the intellectual love of Hashem, which kind of then creates a sort of hidden love in the heart as well. So there's that emotional part of the brain, meaning an emotional part of seichel, so that we learn and we understand the greatness of Hashem, and we contemplate it, we reflect on it, and so on and so forth. At least it comes to that conclusion that this is what we need to be attracted to, right? It's not full-blown love, but it's at least, we sometimes have that with, lots of things like that. Sometimes we have a kind of will to do something because we worked it out. That's important to do kind of thing, at least in our brain, and we kind of attracted to it in concept, which is one way of doing it. And that's why that was his interpretation of what Chazal tell us, that machshava toiva, a good thought, Hashem considers it like an action, but actually that's not really the language. The language is machshava toiva HaKadosh Baruch Hu metzarfo l'maisa. Tzarfo means he attaches it to the action, and that's the idea that Hashem gives us this gift. That even if we develop intellectual love, Hashem will bypass, so to speak, the heart and connect it to the action. And therefore, since what we thought about in our brain and that hisbonenus, that reflection and contemplation that we developed intellectually, inspired the learning of Torah and the keeping of the mitzvahs, and that what helped the person on the journey to aspire to be a Benoni, so that's good enough. That love is still considered bilvavcha, and that's good enough, right? Okay. He said an expression in the last chapter that this is accessible to everyone, even those people who can't develop an openly revealed love in their heart, right? He said, but at least everyone can, and he actually used an interesting expression. He says, Kol mish yesh lo moyach bekotkodoi. Anyone who has a brain in their head can do it, right? Now, in this new section of Tanya, which is, as I said, it's chapter 18, which is going to go till the end of chapter 25, he's going to explain that there's a third alternative. And he's going to talk about something which he alluded to before, but he's going to develop it in great detail. And that is, what happens if someone can't even do that? Because the truth is, it's not so easy. Are you... Okay. Yeah. It's not so easy, right? Because it does require, even that love in the brain requires amazing learning. Requires lots of learning, requires deep thought, requires deep contemplation, right? In other words, it requires to get to a point where that hisbonenus, that contemplation, that reflection, that das, that really deep thinking won't remain in a situation of cognitive dissonance. It will actually inspire the action. That needs not just superficial learning, that needs really deep learning. Now, I mean, we all do it, we can do it on some level, but to the level that he's talking about, yeah, we can all learn a Maimon or a chapter in Tanya and be inspired, and could even or should even make a dent in our day, that we focus on God more, we do our mitzvahs a bit better, and that's what learning Chassidus is all about. But to say that it will achieve the same thing as the open love is not everyone can do it. Maybe that's what he meant when he said everyone has a brain in his head. He's not talking about like just a basic brain. He's talking about anyone who has the ability to do that, right? So now he introduces a third thing. And this is something he's going to call Ava Mesuteres. That there's a deep, innate love and dedication and even Mesiras Nefesh that every Jew just possesses. That's it. It's very hidden, but we all have it. And so much so, he'll explain later, it's actually so strong that, as he'll demonstrate later in this parak, that actually it's the reason why even sometimes completely ignorant people or unobservant people throughout the ages gave up their life for Hashem. Because we just have it. Right? Now, sometimes when we talk about in Emunah, right, we call it the Pintaliyid. It's not referred to as the Pintaliyid here. I mean, we talk about the fifth level of Pintaliyid. Actually, he's going to talk about something different here. He's going to talk about how this happens. But it's a similar idea. It's a similar concept. But basically, it's the idea that this love that we talk about, that we need to have for Hashem in order to be on the journey of aspiration to be a Benoni, even though someone who can't do it the second way that he described before, can at least, we have the ability to connect with that natural hidden love. He calls it the Ava Mesuteres, the hidden love that we have, that we all have as Yidden. And as he explained how we have it, why we have it, and what we can do with it. That's the next 7 chapters. 8 chapters. Okay? I mean, at the end of the day, it's Tanya. And Tanya said at the very beginning, it's a long and short way. So it's not, this is also not without hard work. Right? But it makes it more possible because we actually have it already. But we still have to learn about how we connect to it, how we ignite it, and the perspective that we need to have in order to connect to it. Right? Because what he's going to explain, just give you a very general synopsis, but it's in detail, he's going to explain this love gives the ability of Mesiras Nefesh to every Jew. And ultimately he's going to explain that if we understood the value of each mitzvah, and we understood that every time we don't do a mitzvah, every time we do something wrong, it is in a way similar to Avodah Zarah, then we'll be able to connect that Mesiras Nefesh like many people did when they were faced with the challenge of Avodah Zarah. Right? Like I'll just give you an example. Something happened the other day. I went on Sunday to a Yom HaShoah thing not the main one, I went to the youth here one, whatever they call it. And it was very fascinating. One talk about anti-Semitism, like the ages and all that, but there's one Holocaust survivor that was spoken about, and then he spoke himself, and his whole history and so on, throughout the war, and one of the things was they escaped to a place, and I can't remember exactly how it works, but they weren't religious, but the amazing, Rabbi reminded me of what Tanya says here. And he wanted to re-qualify or something, or get work, and he could only do it if he converted. Like they gave him refuge. I think it was Yugoslavia. It's Egon Samachan spoke. And they gave him refuge, but in order to actually sort of like make progress there, he said he'll have to convert to that. He said absolutely no. Right? But he made the point in the same sentence. I'm not judging anything I'm saying, but it was his point he made that he wasn't religious. So it's not because we have it, right? Convert, no chas v'shalom, right? And what was activated there? The Ava Mysteris, the hidden love for Hashem that we all have innately. What he's going to try and show us in the next 8 chapters is that we can do that with every mitzvah. So not that hard work, but it's there. Okay. So that's the introduction. Let's have a look inside a little bit. Chapter 18. You want to look inside? You want to?
No.
Okay. So he says, in order to explain this much more, milas ma'oid, the word ma'oid. What is he referring to? Right? That pasuk that he said Tanya is based on, that it's all accessible, but the pasuk says not ki korev eilecha, not just that it's close to you and accessible to you, but the pasuk says ki korev eilecha ma'oid. It's very close to you. Like easy, not easy, I'm saying it's like really accessible, right? And he says milas ma'oid from a pasuk in the pasuk of ki korev eilecha dover ma'oid. And don't forget that pasuk, as he's been explaining, includes the part that's the most hard to understand, which is levavcha, your heart, your emotional, your love and fear of Hashem. So he says, tzarich leidan ne'emona. We have to really know the following. That even if someone has very limited knowledge in understanding Hashem, and therefore the Eloi leiv lahadim he doesn't really have that capacity in his heart to develop that love of Hashem, that we ought to really understand the greatness of Hashem, lahoili mimena, to give birth, the filu urechimu, fear and love, afilu b'moicha, even in his brain, usfanase levad, and his understanding only. In other words, even what we were speaking about before, about not revealing it in your heart, but at least developing it in your intellectual experience, right? Afal became, nevertheless, it is still accessible, very accessible, and close to him. Lishmar v'lasais, to God, and to do all mitzvahs haTorah, all the mitzvahs of the Torah. By the way, we often use this expression, lishmar v'lasais, which literally means to protect and to do. What it really means is, lishmar is loisaseh, is not doing what we're not supposed to do. Lasais is doing what we are supposed to do. In other words, lishmar is staying away from bad. Lasais, like we have this with Shabbos, right? Someone says shomer Shabbos means he doesn't do what he's not supposed to do. That's only half of Shabbos. Then there's zocher, to remember the Shabbos. That's the positive things, right? Okay. So a person, it's still accessible. The Talmud Torah can kulam b'fiv, and even to learn Torah in his mouth, which is what he. So the pasuk said, picha, your mouth la soy to do it. That's the mitzvahs. Ubiluvavoy mamish, and even to do it from your heart. From the depths of your heart, but in a very true way. Be the chilu urechimu, with fear and with love of Hashem. How so? Because that love I'm talking about, says the Alter Rebbe, he avo mesuteres is that hidden love, shebelev klol yisrael, which is in the heart of every yid. Where does it come from? It's an inherited love, right? We inherited it from our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Rak, the only thing is, we have to explain, we have to preface Tchila first, Bayer Hativ really well, Shoresh Avazu. Where does it come from? Where does this love come from? Right? In other words, the love that we spoke about before, we understand where it comes from. It comes from thinking, learning, understanding, contemplating. Either it'll give birth to love in the heart in a revealed way, or it won't. But it'll be in the brain, but it doesn't matter. But we know where it comes from, right? But where does this natural love come? Where does that come from? V'inyana, and what is it? What does it do? Like, what is it? What's the mechanism of this love? The Eichi Yerushalayim, we have to understand also, how is it a inheritance? Like, where do we inherit it from? And the fourth thing we have to understand is and how does fear, where does fear come into it? In other words, what we talk about is talk about this natural love of Hashem. Why does that include? Because we need both. We know that we talked about before the two wings of the bird. It's not just love; it's love and fear. Ava v'yira, love and fear, right? In fact, we'll learn much later in Tanya. This talks about now in the daily Tanya that we've been doing is that actually fear most times fear has to come first, right? You gotta. I mean, basic fear. I mean, you gotta surrender first until only then you can love. Otherwise, if you just love, it's like a relationship. Respect comes before love. Otherwise, the love is selfish and doesn't do anything. But all right, so that's what happens. I mean, the basic. We know that the basic foundation of Yiddishkeit is what we call Kabbalah soil. It also means you accept by yourself the yoke of Hashem, and you have basic respect or awe, whatever, or basic fear, whatever how you describe it, in order to do the mitzvahs and not to do the averos. It's very simple, right? And then we have to develop further with a love, and internal love, and a feeling, and so on. So he wants to know this concept of Ava Musateres, the hidden love that we all have. How does it incorporate hidden fear? I guess. What does that mean?
We didn't inherit fear. We only inherited.
So we have this concept of inherited love. I think because it comes from Avram Avinu. I'm not actually. It's a good question. Why can't we just say we inherited both? But it's got to do with the hidden love that we have for Hashem, which includes a concept of fear, which we'll explain later. Okay. So he says like this. The concept is as follows. Ki ha'avos hein ha'merkava. Chazal tell us that the avos were a merkava, they were a chariot for Hashem. What does this mean? So we have this concept, this description in prophecies and Chazal, that Hashem, so to speak, sits on a throne and the throne is on a chariot, right? Now, sometimes that chariot is described as referring to the angels and the seraphim and the entourage, so to speak, that Hashem has in the heavenly, in the world worlds, right? But tzaddikim were even greater than angels. And when it comes to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov particularly, they are referred to as the main Merkava, the main chariot for Hashem, right? I want to go slowly through these concepts because it's a build-up and it's hard to understand. What do we mean by the concept of Merkava? What does that mean? What does Merkava denote? In other words, what is it?
Movement from somewhere to somewhere.
Yeah, but what does it mean when we say that something's a Merkava to something else? What does that mean?
It doesn't act independently.
Oh, exactly. It means complete bittul. That's what it means. Right? Complete bittul. So we say that the avos, and this is written in the Zohar also, right? That their avodah, their service of Hashem was a merkava. They were completely surrendered to Hashem they got to the level where they had no independent functioning. That's what a merkava is. If I go in a wagon, I don't want the wagon to have an independent feeling because I won't get to where I need to go to. I want the merkava just to totally listen to me. Okay. So obviously there's one aspect of the nimshal that is not one aspect of this moshel that is not the same, obviously. When I go into a chariot, I choose to begin with something that has no ability to have independent functioning. That's not true with a human being. A human being can have independent functioning. And the idea is to serve Hashem to a degree where we don't have independent functioning, where the I becomes completely in line with Hashem, right? Okay. Now, what does it actually mean that they were Merkava to Hashem? What does that mean? So the way Hashem relates to the world. Before I get there, just to give you a little story about a little verse, right? So I think I've shared this story with you before, but just to show you what it means. That it's a word I heard from my father many years ago when I was a child. We have a BINA of Vayera, right? Parshat Vayera, that Avraham was talking to Hashem. And then the angels came and he left Hashem to go and talk to the angels, right? So it says he interrupted Hashem. He said, "Don't go away." All right. And the Gemara says that we learn from there that Gedoylach Nosas Orchim, that being hospitable to visitors, is even greater than receiving the Shekhinah. How do we know? Because Avraham Avinu was talking to the Shekhinah and he left. So the obvious question is, we know it's from Avraham Avinu, but Avraham Avinu, right? We can learn from Avraham Avinu, but how did he know? And the answer is because he was a Merkava to Lakus. He was a Merkava. And therefore when he was talking to the angels, and when he was talking to Hashem and he saw the angels, he felt himself going. This is what he was in tune with Hashem's will. So he understood intuitively what Hashem's will was because he felt that he needs to go to the angels, so he knows that's the right thing to do. Right? Most of us can't do this. We can't trust. I always say you can't trust the instinct because you don't know where instinct is coming from. In fact, we do know most of the instincts come from the Nefesh Habamis, right? Which is probably why we shouldn't trust him. Okay, so because we're biased and we have the biases and that's all Nefesh Habamis stuff. Okay, but Avraham Avinu was not like that. He was a Merkava, a total bittul. Yeah, which then the part of the vert goes, just to finish off the vert, that explains a very beautiful thing at the end of Parshas Vayera. We talk about the ultimate test of Avraham Avinu, which was the Akedah, right? So the Akedah have a very, very funny expression. It says that he took his son to the Akedah and he put him on the Mizbech, he tied him up, and then it says, Vayishlach Avram es Yodeh, a very strange expression. Avraham Avinu sent his hand to take the knife to shecht his son. Right? What do you mean he sent his hand? What is that supposed to mean? So that was, but the Akedah was a very strange thing happened. Hashem, for once, to Avraham Avinu, had to hide his true will. What was the true will of Hashem? That Yitzchak should be sacrificed? No. But he couldn't tell that to Avraham Avinu. He had to make it sound as if he wants him to sacrifice Yitzchak because otherwise no test, right? So he said, Kach nos binchas yichitcha, take your son, your only son, etc. V'ha'aleil lo'olam, bring him up on the Mizbeach for a burnt offering. Which later he explained, I said, I didn't tell you to sacrifice, I just said to put him on the Mizbeach. But obviously that was, contextually, that was not understood, right? So Avraham Avinu takes Yitzchak and he's all fired up and he gets up in the morning to do the will of Hashem and he takes Yitzchak and puts him on the Mizbeach and then he's expecting his hand to automatically go and take the knife and it doesn't. Because the Ratzon Hashem came to an end. The will of Hashem was just to get him on the Mizbeach, it wasn't to take the knife. But that couldn't be, in that instant that had to be hidden from Avraham Avinu. So therefore Avraham Avinu says, well, it's not working. So Vayishlach Avram es Yodeh. He sends his hand. He says, go, what do you mean? What's going on here? Go take the knife, that's the will of Hashem. Why is the hand not doing the will of Hashem? Only to realize later that it was okay because the hand wasn't supposed to do it because, right? So anyway. Now, when it's described in Chazal or in Nevi'im that Hashem is a Merkava, what do we mean, right? Like because there's imagery, for example, in Yecheskel we read the Haftarah on Shavuos, where it describes the Merkava, the chariot above with the angels and the lion and the eagle and all the things, right? And the Lachim and the carrying the throne of Hashem, and then he talks about the Adam al Kisei, the man on the throne, which is referring to the supernal man, which is Hashem. What's it actually referring to? It's referring to the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Right? That's what we mean, right? In other words, the way Hashem reveals himself to us is through what we call Seder Ishtalshlus, and he reveals himself through the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Now just to explain the 10 spheres of Atzilus in a minute. So just to, we've done this before, but I just want to explain it again because it's really important to understand this period. And I'll just explain in further detail, which is really important to understand this chapter. So, when Hashem created the world, he wanted to create the world a certain way, and Hashem decided that he's going to first, the world's going to be governed by 10 powers, 10 spheres. Everything, all the worlds are governed by 10 spheres. And Hashem has 10 powers. The world, everything in this world connects back to one of the spheres or combination of the spheres. Like fire is Gevurah, water is Chesed, and so on and so forth, right? So what Hashem did was, although Hashem transcends all of these spheres completely, but nevertheless Hashem, because he has that ability to do so, he revealed within himself 10 definitions. Chochmah, BINA, Das, right? And that's the world of Atzilus. The world of Atzilus is Hashem's 10 powers, Hashem's Chochmah, Hashem's BINA, Hashem's Das, right? Now, the Rambam says, I've explained this before, the Rambam says that you have to know when it comes to Hashem's Chochmah and BINA, it's different to us, right? By us, the person thinking and the power of thought and the subject are all different, but with Hashem it's all one. He's the knower, he's the known, he's the ability to know. It's all one thing, he's indivisible. Says the Rambam, don't expect me to explain this because it's really beyond understanding, but we have to believe this is the way it is, etc., etc. And then there's the famous Maharal, as I explained previously, that Maharal says, what do you mean? You're trying to glorify Hashem's midas. Why do you talk about him in terms of Chachma and altogether? Hashem is transcendent. He doesn't have any definition, not Chachma, not BINA, nothing. So Chassidus explains, based on that Arizal, that actually put the two together. That it's true. Hashem in his essence is above all these things. But Hashem can, if he wants to, because he has the power to be infinite, he also has the power to be somewhat finite. So therefore Hashem, if he wants to, can manifest himself in definitions. And he did in the world of Atzilus. Out on that level, when the Rambam says, I don't think Hashem's Chokhmah is like your Chokhmah. It's not. Hashem's Chokhmah is infinite, totally different, a different world altogether, billions of times more infinite than yours, and different to yours, and it's indivisible, and he is one with his Chokhmah, and so on and so forth. Okay. So Hashem is one with the midas of Atzilus, like it says in the Zohar, Hashem and his Chokhmah is one, Hashem and his Bid is one. So essentially, when we talk about the Chokhmah of the world of Atzilus, or the Bina, or the Chesed, or the Gevurah, we're not talking about separate things, we're talking about manifestations of Hashem. Hey? Sorry?
Sorry, it's on silent. So
Right.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Make sure it's off.
Right? So we're talking about manifestations of Hashem. Okay.
So, Rabbi, are you using Sphira and Mida interchangeably?
Yeah, with Hashem we call them spheres, really, 10 spheres. Spheres are Hashem's manifestations. Yeah. The spheres are divided into Seichel and Midas, yeah. So you have Midas also, because Midas is the way he relates to us, right? So Hashem's Chesed, from Chesed downwards, Chesed to Malchus, is 7 Midas. That's why there's 7 days of the week, because Hashem used his, in other words, just like by us, Chochmah and Adas is how we relate to ourselves, how we conjure these things up within ourselves, whereas Midas is how we respond to the outside. So Hashem, same thing. His Chochmah and Adas is within himself, so to speak, and the way he takes it further, relates to an outside, so to speak, is the Midas, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, which is why there's 6 days and 7, which is Chesed to Soid and then Malchus, right? Because the spheres are divided into two. There's the masculine, which is 6 days of the week, and the feminine, which is Shabbos. So for a different share to explain probably how it works, but okay. Now, let me just explain this a little bit further. It's important to understand. So, the midas of so in Atzilus there was no outside. It's still Hashem, still completely Hashem. The next world after Atzilus is the world of Bria. Bria, by definition, means a creation of something that's other. Now we know that right? Bria is like Bria Yesh Ma'ayin. In other words, there's a Metzias, there's something that exists, so to speak, outside of Hashem. But I say so to speak because in truth nothing exists outside of Hashem, but has that appearance, or appears to be independent, so to speak, right?
Yesh Ma'ayin only comes at Bria, not before.
Correct.
Okay.
Concept of Yesh Ma'ayin doesn't mean. Although having said that, there is a concept of Yesh Ma'ayin. It depends how you translate the word Yesh Ma'ayin. But yeah, how we normally understand it, that's the concept of Bria. Bria means creation, right? Right? So in other words, what happens is like this. You have the 10 spheres of Atzilus, the last one being Malchus. Malchus is always the last level of every world. What is Malchus? Malchus is the feminine, right? Malchus is what catches and absorbs the above Midas, and then processes it and hides it and dilutes it and then gives birth, right? So Malchus of Atzilus has in it, but has in a condensed way, because that's part of Tzimtzum, right? That's how it works. So, but it has in it all the spheres of Atzilus, and then gives birth to the 10 spheres of Bria. Yeah, Bria is the first madrega of Seder Mishtalshalus, where you have a creation. Now, the creation of Bria is infinitely greater than our creation. The creation of Bria is the Malachim that are completely bottled to Hashem, and that they only feel godliness, and etc. But there's something that feels. There's not just God, so to speak, right?
And the Shamas come from Atzilus?
Yeah. Very, very, very few Neshamas come from Atzilus. Most of them come from Bria or Yetzirah. Or even Asiyah sometimes, as we'll see. They all come through the whole Seder Shtalsh, but as we learned at the very beginning, there's different madregas of Neshamas, because Neshamas also come from the various different worlds, right? But some Neshamas are very high Neshamas, and it's like an express train. They go through all the worlds, but don't get affected by them. whereas some neshamas get affected that going down, and some neshamas are as low as the malchus of Asiyah, right? What's the lowest level? Okay. Now we'll see how this all connects in a second, right? So now let's just understand this. So the 10 spheres of Atzilus give birth to the 10 spheres. Malchus of Atzilus gives birth to the 10 spheres of Bria. Malchus of Bria gives birth to 10 spheres of Yitzira. Malchus of Yitzira gives birth to 10 spheres of Asiyah, which we are an outcome of Asiyah, right? The world, the large. And then we have these 10 powers, right? So how does it work? Is there, can we compare, let's say Ach Chesed. What's the connection between Ach Chesed and the Chesed of Atzilus? On one hand, nothing, right?
Well, the concept.
Oh, so in other words, there are properties that are connected, right? And that's the greatness of this 10 sphere system, is that everything connects back and back and back and back, and therefore we know that it's really a manifestation of Hashem in a very deep way, even in the world, but certainly in the Neshama, right? Okay. So exactly, that's right. So in other words, on the one level, Achas and Atzilus is Achas and Atzilus is ridiculous even to put them in the same sentence, in the one hand. On the other hand, not really. There's a connection, right? Because the connection is that there's a properties of the concept of Chesed no matter where you talk about it, right? It's the idea of giving, it's the idea of expanding, it's the idea of revealing, whatever the case is, right? Yeah? That's why everything in this world even has we're not going to be talking about the world now, but I'm trying to say, but we can talk about the Neshama, but everything in the world has a shorish, has an origin in Seder Ishtalshalos, right? The sweetness of a fruit is rooted maybe in Chesed. I don't know exactly where it's rooted. Let's say Chesed, right? Obviously, Chesed of Bria even has no connection to the sweetness of the fruit. Sweetness of the fruit is a physical thing. It's nothing, right? But it's a spiritual, a divine, whatever. It's a sweetness. It has the same properties as sweetness, whatever the case. Now, everything in the world has an origin, but with the neshama is godly, right? So in other words, everything in the world that way was created is through a tzimtzum that is not like the neshama. The world is not godliness. The world is Hashem is completely hidden from the world. Every neshama, even a lower level of neshama, also goes through the same ishtalshlus, but is still godly. In other words, it's still godly when it comes down. Yeah, okay.
So the neshama is different to the life force in things?
Yeah. The nefesh lakis, for sure.
Because a rock has a life force.
Yeah, but it's a different type of life force. It's a different level of godliness then.
But in us, our neshama is equivalent to our life force.
Yeah, but we said, first of all, our nefesh abamis gives us life, physical life, right? By someone that's in tune with the nefesh lakis, it comes to the nefesh lakis if you're lucky. But it's but it's a different type of thing. It's a godly force that's revealed. It's not hidden. It's a whole other discussion how the godly force. There's godly force in everything, correct? The chair is godly force, but it's godly force that is so condensed that it's completely hidden. That's why we don't feel it. You don't feel godliness. We can feel godliness because we have a neshama. The non-observant Jew says, "I'm not converting." It's because he has a neshama, and the neshama shines through, right? So the neshama is much more revealed, much more openly godly, and in the depth of the neshama, the pintalid is really one with Hashem. It's totally different, right? Okay. As we'll see in a second. So let's go back to the world of Atzilus now. I'm just explaining this so we can understand the rest of the parak. What happens before Atzilus? You'll see why I'm explaining this in a second. So there's what we call higher than Seder Ishtalshalos. Before Hashem manifested Himself in finite definitions, right? So there Hashem is totally infinite and totally undefined, right? What's the point of connection between Atzilus and higher than Atzilus? Point of connection is something we call Chochmah of Atzilus. Now, Chochmah is very important to understand because he's going to use it in this parak a lot. The concept of Chochmah. Chochmah, just like we know with regard to understanding, like we talk about real intellect, right? That Chochmah is, we learned this in Perek Gimel, Chochmah is koyach ma. Right, those words koyach ma. It's a power, but ma, what is it? So, just like Ba'as, for example, what is the point of Chokhmah in thinking? When we intellectualize something. Chokhmah is that flash we always talk about, that moment of truth. Right? What actually is it? It's the connection between the world of intellect of the person to what is higher than the person. That's why when we have a revelation of Chokhmah, right? It's coming from somewhere else. It's not that we figured it out. That's BINA. BINA is when you figure out what Chokhmah is telling you. Chokhmah is like a flash from a transcendent place. That's why when a person has a flash of Chokhmah, there's two things that happen. He understands nothing and yet has complete clarity. You understand that? When you have a flash, I got it. Can you explain it? At that point you can't explain a thing. But I'm absolutely clear. I've cracked the code. Why? Because it's so intense at Chokhmah, it's actually coming from above me. So it's not my limited intellect. It's actually a transcendent flash that is revealing itself in me. Right? And therefore suddenly there's like clarity, because like it's clarity coming from a source higher than my limitation. And yet I can't communicate it because I'm very limited. They've got to take that flash and translate it into BINA. Okay. All right? So in Seder Ishtalshalus, Chokhmah is that point, also the same thing. Chokhmah is what brought higher than Ishtalshalus into Ishtalshalus. So it later on in Tanya he makes that expression that when we talk about complete revelation of Hashem where there's nothing else and it's complete just godliness, that is the Madrega in Seder Ishtalshalus. Where can you find that? In Chokhmah Vatzilus. Chokhmah Vatzilus is that point of revelation in the Seder Ishtalshalus, which is a keli, it's a vessel, and it's a manifestation of the infinity of Hashem, which comes from higher than Seder Ishtalshalus. Right? So that's how Seder Ishtalshalus starts off, with Chokhmah Vatzilus.
And that's where the chariot connects to.
We'll see. Let's see. Now, Chokhmah then dilutes and goes to BINA. BINA goes to Das. Das goes to Chesed. The first till Malchus. Still all in Atzilus. Atzilus is all godliness, but right? Okay, Malchus. But Malchus has in it all the spheres. And then Malchus gives birth to the next set. Already now we're talking about in Bria. Right? In Bria. But when Malchus gave birth to Chokhmah of Bria, yes, it's Chokhmah of Bria, but it came from Malchus of Atzilus, which Malchus of Atzilus has all the spheres, including all the way up to Chokhmah of Atzilus. So the Chokhmah of Bria is connected to the Chokhmah of Atzilus. It's not disconnected completely. Same thing with Chokhmah of Yitzirah, same with Chokhmah of Asiyah. Same thing with Malchus of Asiyah. Now, when we say that the Avos were Merkava, it means they were Merkava to Hashem, to Hashem's manifestation. Which means they were Merkava, they were totally bottled to the 10 spheres of Atzilus, including Chokhmah of Atzilus. Right? Because they were totally bottled to the 10 spheres of Atzilus, therefore they were able to draw down, not only for themselves, but to bequeath to all the generations that came from them, a neshama that comes from the 10 spheres of Atzilus, and even comes from Chokhmah Atzilus, which, as we learned in Perek Beis, the ultimate origin of the Nefesh Elokis is Chokhmah Atzilus. I mean, the real source is even higher than that, like Chokhmah Atzilus is, but when neshama comes into being in some form, it really rooted in Chokhmah Atzilus, right? I'm just making this outside a bit. We'll do it inside in a second because we'll just get a picture. But then what happens is, as the neshama comes down to different people, to different levels, different things, right? It's different neshamas are affected. And you go down to very, very low levels of neshamas. But all levels of neshamas come from somewhere in the spheres. So what happens if you have a neshama, let's say, that's the lowest level? A neshama that comes from Malchus of Asiyah. Right? Malchus of Asiyah. I mean, it goes even more than that. I'll show you when we get to that. I'll show you even how it breaks down even more. But Right? Malchus of Asiyah has it at Chach of Asiyah, which has it at Malchus of Bria, which has it all at Chach of Asiyah. Which therefore means that neshama that the Avos draw down for us, because that neshama came from Chach of Asiyah, they were able to draw it down for us because they were a makova to the 10 spheres of Asiyah. Right? That neshama, however it comes into us, or in whatever level it comes into us, is connected all the way back to Chochmah Vatzilus, which he refers to in this perek as the Chochmah of the neshama. But he doesn't mean the Chochmah as an intellectual part of the neshama. It means the Chochmah of the neshama like the Emunah, the Mesiras Nefesh, the bittul of the neshama. Because the infusion of the connection to the Chochmah Vatzilus.
So why is it different into the hinges?
It's similar, just use a different terminology here.
But it's the same thing.
Yeah, it is the same thing. It lives in the same place, but it just
So
uses.
why are you making a distinction?
No, because just he makes that distinction in terminology. Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Because the truth is, when we talk about the Yechida, really, it's even higher than Chochmah Atzilus, but it doesn't matter. But because Chochmah Atzilus is really connected to highest. When we talk about Yechida, we mean Yechida, the essence of Hashem, which is higher than Seder Shloshes. But he's talking about the neshama as it exists, right?
But you didn't need the inheritance from the others because the way the world has been created all would have had the Chochmah from Atzilus in us anyway.
No, it wouldn't.
But it's come all the way down.
Yeah, but not
to
through,
now
no, but
it's
that's
zero.
yeah, but only the obvious to be a creation. But the neshama is not a creation. The neshama is a elikus. It's a creation, but it's a godly creation, which came to us because the first one to have that neshama was Avraham Avinu, who was totally bottled to Hashem, and therefore that bittul he gave over to us. The world is not bottled. Had we not had the neshama, it would just be another creation, like the table and the chair, or like a nefesh habamis, which is another creation. Creation, by definition, means where Hashem is totally hidden. Creation means where it's outside of it's like a bria, like everything else in the world.
And if you're not Jewish?
You don't have godly soul. Different. That level of bittul, level of Mesiras Nefesh only exists by Jews. I know that's not the
But you do have the neshama.
different type of neshama. The nefesh habamis. Yeah, and every human being is created with Tselem Elokim and the image of God. Yes, true. A human being is higher than everything else. Any human being. Human being is higher than an animal, for sure.
That's skip then, explain to me.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so different soul, but we're all created in the image of God. So how do
Image of God means we have an imprint. We have the ability to reveal God on some level, which is the mission of every human being, but in a very limited way. It's different. That's the point here. The point is that's only the neshama that came to us, B'Yerusha, came from inheritance from Avraham Avinu. The bittul, we don't have that bittul. I tell a story like this. You can talk about later about Mesiras Nefesh, right? The Chassidim used to tell a story like this, that Aristotle, I think it's Aristotle, died and he came to heaven. It's a real story, just a story that they tell to bring out a point, right? Because there is this concept that Mesiras Nefesh only exists by Jewish people. What does that mean? It's not true. You see non-Jews give up their life also for their ideals, or even for God. Like Aristotle died because he believed in God. You know that he was killed, right? So they say that Aristotle came up to Lamaila to heaven, and they were impressed with him. And he said he wants a place next to Avraham Avinu. In Gan Eden, he wants to be Avraham Avinu's neighbor. Why? Because he also, Avraham Avinu gave him a and jumped into the furnace. He was ready to sacrifice his son. Him too, right? He died because he believed in God. So they answered him, "You're completely wrong. Avraham Avinu died. Avraham Avinu was ready to give up his son for Mesiras Nefesh. You just changed one taiva for another, one desire for another. What does that mean?" He's like this, right? Because even Avraham Avinu, we make a huge distinction between the time he jumped into the furnace and when he was sacrificing his son. Why? The emunah of a non-Jew can be very strong, but it's a rational emunah at the end of the day. makes sense because it believes in it. And sometimes by non-Jews they can believe in something to such an extent that they're even ready to give up their life for it, right? And meaning they understand that life's not worth living unless you're connected to this idea, which is an amazing thing. Avraham Avinu, when he jumped into the furnace, that was what he was doing, really. It was correct and legitimate, but we know that Avraham Avinu didn't become a Jew until Lech Lecha, until he had a mitzvah, until he connected to Hashem in that way, right? Because it was a rational belief. He had worked out that Hashem exists to such an extent that monotheism made such sense that it's not worth, can't live without that, right? And throughout the ages, even with non-Jews, when they gave up their life for ideal, and even for Emunah in Hashem, it's because they believed in it strongly. They lived by it. They lived by it to such an extent they're ready to die for it, right? You never ever find the story about someone who doesn't believe in something and suddenly gives up his life for it, except by Yidden. Avraham Avinu, when it came to the Akedah, he did something that made no sense. That he didn't understand. Made no sense whatsoever. Akedah was bad for business. Avraham Avinu lived his whole life spreading monotheism. If he would have gone through the Akedah, he would have closed up shop. I mean, if Akedah would have happened, so to speak, right? And he knew that. And he was going to shaft his son. That was his intention. He was going, knowing he comes down to the mountain. They say, well, he says, I shafted him. He loses his entire Chabadas. That's it, finished. He's gone. Nothing left. Shouldn't know what everyone's going to stay around, to stick around and believe in a God that tells you to shaft your son. Right? And he's ready to do it. Why? Because he was bottled. It was a merkava. That's what we mean when we say Mesiras Nefesh is only by that Chochmah. That Chochmah of Atzilus is only by Yid, in a revealed way. Or hidden way, but it's revealed, can be revealed. Otherwise, it's like rest of creation. That, you know, that default position of the world is that you don't see Hashem. It can be an intellectual, only a human being can, different than an animal, of course, a human being can believe. Non-Jews have 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. One of them is monotheism. They have to believe in Hashem. Right?
So do you think anti-Semites know this? That's why they hate us.
Why they hate us? I don't know, because
Do they know this?
maybe. I don't know if they irrationally know it. I mean, because these idiots on the campus things, they don't know anything actually at the moment.
No, that's different.
They don't know themselves what they
No,
they don't
I
even know.
understand
They don't even know
that.
what they believe in. So. Yeah, I mean, in an essential sense, that is the root of anti-Semitism. It's the forces, it's Klippa fighting against revelation of Allah. Of course, Klippa is concealment of God, and Yiddishkeit is about the revelation of God, and there's a fight between the two, 100%. Esav and Yaakov. Of course it is. Of course that's where it stems from. And then it manifests itself in all sorts of different things and rationalization. Right. By the way, it's the bad news. I mean, it's not a depressing disease, but it's almost like that. I mean, the fact is, until Mashiach comes, it's going to be around because it's the Gemara says, Yodua, it's known halacha. It's halacha almost that Esav Soinal Yaakov, Esav hates Yaakov, because they're at odds with each other. And that's off topic, but that's the point, right? So therefore, what he's going to get to is, where does the Ava Mesuteres come from? Where does that hidden love come from? It comes because we all have in us the Chochmah of the Nefesh. How did it come? It came because Avraham Avinu was a Merkava to the Esrei Vatzilus. He bequeathed us the Neshama. But every level of Satan, but our Neshama is not on Avraham Avinu's level. But even the Neshama that comes from Malchus of Asir, ultimately is still connected to the Chachma of Atzilus. And that's the Chachma, which is the truth of the Neshama and the power of Emunah and the power of Mesiras Nefesh. Okay, we didn't do inside. That's the introduction. Next time we'll do inside.
So they were vehicles, they were covered because they were people. They're like us. I mean, different to the...
Yeah, but they were totally bottled. They'd come to the level they were totally
No, I understand.
one with the 10th Surah of
Chi
Atzilus.
was complete.
No, she's a
It's a
bria.
Chi.
It's a bria, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Now that's what I want to explain. Of course, the whole world is connected to 10 spheres. But it's different. The whole world has is through the mechanism of complete tzimtzum, where that's not the default position. Default position of a table is that it's a separate thing. We have to learn and understand that it's not. That ultimately the whole world is a bottom, right? In other words, the neshama is not the only thing that comes from the 10 spheres of Atzilus, right? It goes back to Perek Beis, that the definition of the case comes from the machshava of Hashem, whereas everything else comes from the speech of Hashem, right? And the difference is, in other words, the mechanism of how it came about. Both come to the 10 spheres. That's why ultimately we connect everything in the world to Hashem. The difference is, that everything else in the world comes from Hashem's speech. Speech, by definition, is a concealing tool. When I speak, you can't tell what I'm thinking. So my speech is separate from me. The neshama comes from the chshava of Hashem, thought. Just like thought and a person is one, right? So it's a different, so that's a complete difference. Both have the 10 spheres behind them, but in a completely different...
And the neshama is not our life force.
Sorry?
The neshama is not our life force.
Well, that's an interesting discussion. So, by Yid, it's supposed to be our life force. Even our gashmistic life, but that's only if we connect to the neshama. It's only if we really make neshama our main focus, then even Hashem's gashmistic blessing comes through nefesh elokis. Otherwise, it comes to nefesh bamis. That's namo nefesh.
Thank you so much.
Every single thing is important. You forget one little thing, speech and thought you got, right? It's till the very end.
Yes.
Oh.
We'll go over, next we'll do it inside, so we'll revise it again.